Let's learn 100 body movement verbs together. Walk.
Walk.
Example, she walked to the store every morning.
Example, she walked to the store every morning.
Run.
Run.
Example, he ran faster than anyone else in the race.
Example, he ran faster than anyone else in the race.
Jump.
Jump.
Example, the cat jumped over the fence.
Example, the cat jumped over the fence.
Hop.
Hop.
Example, the children hopped on one foot during the game.
Example, the children hopped on one foot during the game.
Skip.
Skip. Example, she skipped down the sidewalk happily.
Example, she skipped down the sidewalk happily. Leap.
Leap.
Example, the deer leaped gracefully across the meadow.
Example, the deer leaped gracefully across the meadow.
Slide.
Slide.
Example, he slid down the hill on a sled.
Example, he slid down the hill on a sled.
Crawl.
Crawl.
Example, the baby crawled across the floor.
Example, the baby crawled across the floor.
Climb.
Climb.
Example, they climbed the mountain together.
Example, they climbed the mountain together.
Swim.
Swim.
Example, she swam across the lake effortlessly.
Example, she swam across the lake effortlessly.
Dive.
Dive.
Example, he dove into the pool head first.
Example, he dove into the pool head first.
Glide.
Glide.
Example, the skater glided smoothly across the ice.
Example, the skater glided smoothly across the ice.
Sprint.
Sprint.
Example, she sprinted to catch the bus.
Example, she sprinted to catch the bus.
Jog.
Jog.
Example, he jogged around the park every morning.
Example, he jogged around the park every morning.
Tiptoe.
Tiptoe.
Example, she tiptoed quietly into the room.
Example, she tiptoed quietly into the room.
Stroll.
Stroll.
Example, they strolled along the beach at sunset.
Example, they strolled along the beach at sunset.
March.
March.
Example, the soldiers marched in perfect unison.
Example, the soldiers marched in perfect unison.
Stride.
Stride.
Example, he strode confidently into the meeting.
Example, he strode confidently into the meeting.
Dance.
Dance.
Example, they danced all night at the party.
Example, they danced all night at the party.
Twirl.
Twirl.
Example, she twirled around in her new dress.
Example, she twirled around in her new dress.
Spin.
Spin.
Example, the top spun quickly on the table.
Example, the top spun quickly on the table.
Sway.
Sway.
Example, the trees swayed in the wind.
Example, the trees swayed in the wind.
Shake.
Shake.
Example, he shook his head in disbelief.
Example, he shook his head in disbelief.
Wiggle. Wiggle. Example, the worm wiggled on the hook.
Example, the worm wiggled on the hook.
Waddle.
Waddle.
Example, the duck waddled to the pond.
Example, the duck waddled to the pond.
Gallop.
Gallop.
Example, the horse galloped across the field.
Example, the horse galloped across the field.
Trot.
Trot.
Example, The dog trotted happily beside its owner.
Example. The dog trotted happily beside its owner.
Canter.
Canter.
Example. The horse cantered around the arena.
Example. The horse cantered around the arena.
Charge.
Charge.
Example. The bull charged at the matador.
The bull charged at the matador.
Rush.
Rush.
Example. She rushed to finish her homework.
Example. She rushed to finish her homework.
Dash.
Dash.
Example. He dashed across the street to catch the light.
Example. He dashed across the street to catch the light.
Hike.
Hike.
Example. They hiked up the trail to the summit.
Example. They hiked up the trail to the summit.
Trek.
Trek.
Example. The explorers trekked through the jungle.
Example. The explorers trekked through the jungle.
Amble.
Ambly.
Example. They ambled through the park on a lazy afternoon.
Example. They ambled through the park on a lazy afternoon.
Saunter.
Saunter.
Example. He sauntered into the cafe looking relaxed.
Example. He sauntered into the cafe looking relaxed.
Mosey.
Mosey.
Example. They moseyed along the riverbank, enjoying the view.
Example. They moseyed along the riverbank, enjoying the view.
Scamper.
Scamper.
Example. The squirrels scampered up the tree.
Example. The squirrels scampered up the tree.
Scurry.
Scurry.
Example. The mice scurried into their hole.
Example. The mice scurried into their hole.
Skedaddle.
Skedaddle.
Example. The kids skedaddled when they heard the bell.
Example. The kids skedaddled when they heard the bell.
Shuffle.
Shuffle.
Example. He shuffled his feet nervously.
Example. He shuffled his feet nervously.
Sneak.
Sneak.
She sneaked out of the house after dark.
She sneaked out of the house after dark.
Creep.
Creep.
Example. The spy crept silently through the building.
Example. The spy crept silently through the building.
Lunge.
Lunge.
Example. He lunged forward to grab the ball.
Example. He lunged forward to grab the ball.
Stretch.
Stretch.
Example. She stretched her arms above her head.
Example. She stretched her arms above her head.
Bend.
Bend.
Example. He bent down to pick up the coin.
Example. He bent down to pick up the coin.
Twist.
Twist.
Example. She twisted her ankle while running.
Example. She twisted her ankle while running.
Turn.
Turn.
Example. He turned around to face the noise.
Example. He turned around to face the noise.
Rotate.
Rotate.
Example. The earth rotates on its axis.
Example. The earth rotates on its axis.
Roll.
Roll.
Example. The ball rolled down the hill.
Example. The ball rolled down the hill.
Cartwheel.
Cartwheel.
Example. She did a perfect cartwheel in the yard.
Example. She did a perfect cartwheel in the yard.
Somersault.
Somersault.
Example. He somersaulted into the pool.
Example. He somersaulted into the pool.
Flip.
Flip.
Example. She flipped the pancake in the air.
Example. She flipped the pancake in the air.
Handstand.
Handstand.
Example. He did a handstand against the wall.
Example. He did a handstand against the wall.
Headstand.
Headstand.
Example. She practiced her headstand in yoga class.
Example. She practiced her headstand in yoga class.
Leapfrog.
Leapfrog.
Example. The children played leapfrog in the park.
Example. The children played leapfrog in the park.
Duck.
Duck.
Example, he ducked to avoid the flying ball.
Example, he ducked to avoid the flying ball.
Dodge.
Dodge.
Example, she dodged the oncoming traffic.
Example, she dodged the oncoming traffic.
Sidestep.
Sidestep.
Example, he sidestepped the puddle.
Example, he sidestepped the puddle.
Pivot.
Pivot.
Example, the dancer pivoted on her heel.
Example, the dancer pivoted on her heel.
Shuffle.
Shuffle.
Example, the old man shuffled down the hallway.
Example, the old man shuffled down the hallway.
Hobble.
Hobble.
Example, he hobbled around on crutches.
Example, he hobbled around on crutches.
Limp.
Limp.
Example, she limped after twisting her ankle.
Example, she limped after twisting her ankle.
Trudge.
Trudge.
Example, they trudged through the snow to get home.
Example, they trudged through the snow to get home.
Stomp.
Stomp.
Example, he stomped his foot in frustration.
Example, he stomped his foot in frustration.
Stamp.
Stamp.
Example, she stamped her feet to keep warm.
Example, she stamped her feet to keep warm.
Kick.
Kick.
Example, he kicked the soccer ball into the goal.
Example, he kicked the soccer ball into the goal.
Punch.
Punch.
Example, she punched the punching bag with force.
Example, she punched the punching bag with force.
Jab.
Jab.
Example, he jabbed his finger at the map.
Example, he jabbed his finger at the map.
Slap.
Slap.
Example, she slapped the table in anger.
Example, she slapped the table in anger.
Clench.
Clench.
Example, he clenched his fists in determination.
Example, he clenched his fists in determination.
Grasp.
Grasp.
Example, she grasped the rope tightly.
Example, she grasped the rope tightly.
Grab.
Grab.
Example, he grabbed the last cookie from the plate.
Example, he grabbed the last cookie from the plate.
Hold.
Hold.
Example, she held the baby gently.
Example, she held the baby gently.
Lift.
Lift.
Example, he lifted the heavy box.
Example, he lifted the heavy box.
Carry.
Carry.
Example, she carried the groceries into the house.
Example, she carried the groceries into the house.
Push.
Push.
Example, he pushed the door open.
Example, he pushed the door open.
Pull.
Pull.
Example, she pulled the chair closer to the table.
Example, she pulled the chair closer to the table.
Drag.
Drag.
Example, he dragged the suitcase behind him.
Example, he dragged the suitcase behind him.
Yank.
Yank.
Example, he yanked the cord out of the socket.
Example, he yanked the cord out of the socket.
Squeeze.
Squeeze.
Example, she squeezed the lemon into her tea.
Example, she squeezed the lemon into her tea.
Pat.
Pat.
Example, he patted the dog on its head.
Example, he patted the dog on its head.
Tap.
Tap.
Example, she tapped her fingers on the desk.
Example, she tapped her fingers on the desk.
Clap.
Clap.
Example, they clapped their hands in applause.
Example, they clapped their hands in applause.
snap.
snap,
Example, he snapped his fingers to get their attention.
example, he snapped his fingers to get their attention.
Flick.
Flick,
Example, she flicked the switch to turn on the light.
example, she flicked the switch to turn on the light.
Pinch.
Pinch,
Example, he pinched his nose to avoid the smell.
example, he pinched his nose to avoid the smell.
Stroke.
Stroke,
Example, she stroked the cat's fur.
example, she stroked the cat's fur.
Caress.
Caress,
Example, he caressed her cheek softly.
example, he caressed her cheek softly.
Tickle.
Tickle,
Example, she tickled him until he laughed.
example, she tickled him until he laughed.
Brush.
Brush,
Example, he brushed the crumbs off the table.
example, he brushed the crumbs off the table.
Rub.
Rub,
Example, she rubbed her eyes sleepily.
example, she rubbed her eyes sleepily.
Scratch.
Scratch,
Example, he scratched his head in confusion.
example, he scratched his head in confusion.
Nudge.
Nudge,
Example, she nudged him to wake him up.
example, she nudged him to wake him up.
Shove.
Shove,
Example, he shoved the heavy box into the corner.
example, he shoved the heavy box into the corner.
Prod.
Prod,
Example, she prodded him with her elbow.
example, she prodded him with her elbow.
Poke.
Poke.
Example, he poked the fire with a stick.
Example, he poked the fire with a stick.
Swing.
Swing,
Example, she swung on the playground swing.
example, she swung on the playground swing.
Wug.
Wug.
Example, the dog wagged its tail happily.
Example, the dog wagged its tail happily.
Flutter.
Flutter,
Example, the butterfly's wings fluttered softly.
example, the butterfly's wings fluttered softly.
Thanks for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe to my channel.